Good morning. This is Chuck Delaney, and welcome to the first in a three-part series about child support. Part one is called Child Support Basics, What Parents Should Know.
Here are some basic terms, and I have to tell you right off the bat, child support is filled with abbreviations and acronyms, but these six are crucial. The CP and the NCP, the custodial parent and the non-custodial parent. The custodial parent is the parent with whom the child spends the bulk of the time and to whom child support is paid on behalf of the child by the non-custodial parent. Now, the CP could be either the biological mother or father of the child. It could also be a relative or guardian, whoever is the primary caregiver of the child or children on the case. Current support, that's the amount that an NCP is required to pay on a regular basis based on the support order. Arrears are unpaid child support debt that should have been paid as current support but didn't get paid. And when there are arrears on a case, that's when enforcement actions can begin. DSS is the Department of Social Services, which is the parent agency that includes the Human Resources Administration, of which OCSS is a part. You see what I'm saying about all these abbreviations? Last one for now, CA, cash assistance. That is cash assistance paid to a parent with children. It could be either the custodial parent or the non-custodial parent, or conceivably both. It's what's formally known as TANF, the Temporary Aid for Needy Families. So with those definitions out of the way, let's go to the next slide. I want to stress the value and importance of child support. First off, legal parentage must be established for child support to flow. Now, about a year ago, we changed the word paternity to parentage because parentage is more all-encompassing and reflects the fact that you might have a family where the parents of the child, neither one of them is the biological father of the child. So paternity became kind of an outmoded term, so we've substituted it with parentage. Regular payments are made based on the NCP's income, as opposed to arbitrary, I'll give you 20 bucks this week, I'll give you $40 next week, I can't give you anything this week, times are tough. It also creates a method where there's formal documentation of child support, and that's important because it prevents arguments. We can document for either the CP, the NCP, or the court, if it comes to that, exactly what child support was paid and when. Also, collections are enforced automatically with OCSS enforcement techniques that make sure that if money is not being paid on a regular basis, steps will be taken to try to collect that money. It also means that the cost is shared by both parents. And I just want to comment that parentage is important because that will give the child inheritance rights. It also gives the non-custodial parent a say in the child's future, medical care, schooling, if the child were for some reason put up for adoption. So, getting parentage established is the first step in establishing a child support order. Let's go to the next slide. Child support improves outcomes for families. This has been shown in many studies. It helps moms or custodial parents find work and be available for work because there's also child support payments available for child care. It gives fathers a voice in the children's future. It increases the likelihood that they can engage with their children, and it tends to help them find and keep employment. For children, the studies show that it helps children complete school. They're more likely to exhibit increased self-control, and many other social indicators show that when there's child support, it's a positive thing. Next slide. Now, who do we serve? And the answer is we serve everyone. mothers, fathers, guardians, regardless of income or immigration status. And I want to stress something here. Child support is federally mandated. It is state supervised, and it is locally administered. Federally mandated, but state supervised. That means different states go about things differently. For example, not every state will serve custodial or non-custodial parents who don't have proper immigration status. New York State, we don't look at that. Sometimes we hear from custodial parents who say, I don't want to apply for child support because I'm afraid, my ex, he's a nice guy, but he's not a legal citizen. And if I apply for child support, he'll get deported. No, we don't look at that. I also want to stress state supervised. There are states that will throw people in jail, will throw non-custodial parents in jail for only being behind a few $100s in child support. It's estimated that 1/6 of all people incarcerated in South Carolina are there for child support issues. There is no pipeline to incarceration in New York State. Maybe a dozen people are incarcerated each year in New York State for failure to pay child support. And those are egregious offenders. It's the doctor who says, I'm not giving my ex anything. You take away my driver license, I'll hire a chauffeur. I don't care. That's the kind of person that we will take to court and make them consider the option of incarceration. Now, I should add that for non-cash cases, there's a nominal annual fee charged to the custodial parent of $3,500, which is charged only if we collect $550 or more during the course of the year. It's a good deal. And for people who come to us on cash assistance, we'll talk about that in a minute, there is no fee. Next slide. Now, over the course of our time together, we're going to cover what we call the life cycle of the case. And you have to realize a parent's relationship with child support can be a long affair. If you apply for child support when the child's 2 years old, in New York State, the age of emancipation is 21. That means we're going to have a relationship that's possibly going to last 19 years. It has a life cycle. And we're going to look at first opening a case, then establishing parentage, establishing orders, how we collect and distribute support, and how to enforce and modify orders. Next slide. So there are two ways into the system. For custodial parents who are receiving cash assistance on behalf of the children, they are given a mandatory referral to come to one of the OCSS borough offices. For custodial parents not receiving cash assistance, they come into our offices in family court, or they can apply with the recently developed child support mobile app. They can download the online application and return it via mail or email. They can call us and receive the application and return it via mail or email, or they can come to family court for help. There's a family court in every borough. Whichever pathway leads into child support, an OCSS caseworker is going to discuss with the custodial parent the case and complete the child support application. And we will even help prepare the summons and give you help serving the summons. And that's true for either the custodial parent or the non-custodial parent in the case where the non-custodial parent might be seeking a modification of the existing order to bring it down. Okay, next slide. If there's a concern about any kind of domestic violence or abuse, there are avenues to get child support safely. One is that you can request electronic testimony instead of an in-person appearance at court. You can request that the court not reveal your location, residence, or employer. Your personal information can be removed from petitions, notices, and any financial disclosures. However, it's not possible to suppress the name of the county, the child support agency, or the court that's going to be involved issuing the order. If genetic testing is required to establish parentage, That can be done at separate times so that the custodial parent and non-custodial parent won't cross paths. And if need be, you can file for an order of protection. For more information, we have a flyer called Getting Child Support Safely. There's a link to that that we'll come upon later on. So one thing that's essential is parentage has to be established. Without that, there can't be a support order. There are multiple ways that parentage might be established. If the couple was married when the child was born, that establishes parentage right then and there. If the couple has never been married, there is an acknowledgement of parentage, we call it an AOP, that can be executed and usually is at the hospital when the child is born. It can also be done later at a child support office. In certain circumstances, it may be settled in court, either by a verbal acknowledgement. The support magistrate will ask the non-custodial parent, "Are you the father of this child?" "Yes, Your Honor, I am." Or if the non-custodial parent expresses doubt, there can be mandatory DNA testing. The importance of establishing parentage is that it brings social benefits to the child and helps build the father-child relationship. It preserves inheritance rights, legally grants the child access to key benefits such as Veterans Administration, Social Security benefits, SSI. It also gives fathers a voice in court-ordered visitation, custody, adoption rights. And remember, no support order can be made if parentage is in question. By the way, the fee for DNA testing is relatively low cost. It's $40 a person, but that can be waived for cash assistance clients and others with extenuating circumstances. So basically, the pathway is the custodial parent visits us either at the borough office or in family court. We locate the NCP if that's necessary, and then a petition is filed with family court either for parentage and support, or if parentage has been established, just support. The court determines the parentage if necessary, and a support amount that establishes the order, and support can be received in as little as 2 weeks. And orders are based on both parents' income. Orders can be modified if income changes, and employment services are offered by OCSS to help non-custodial parents meet the requirements of their order. The key elements of a court order include the obligation amount. Let's say it's $100. The frequency, every 2 weeks. The payment date, first payment will be March 16th. Medical support, all child support orders provide for who is going to provide medical insurance for the child. The support magistrate will look at if either parent has health insurance with their job. If they both do, the support magistrate will pick what he or she considers to be the better medical support. Now, there are also different types of support in a court order. The most common are basic support, retroactive support, and I'll get to that in a minute, and maybe childcare support up until the time the child starts school so that the custodial parent can also work. Next slide. Now, I want to stress it is very important that the NCP participates in the process from day one, because if the NCP doesn't participate, they're likely to get a higher order. If the NCP participates, child support will be aligned with the NCP's income. If the NCP, here comes some more abbreviations and initials, is below the FPL or the SSR, there are protections in place. FPL is the federal poverty line. SSR is the New York State Self-Support Reserve. I'm going to give you those numbers in a minute. If the self-support reserve is higher, because we realize it's expensive to live in New York, more so than in, say, Alabama or probably Louisiana. If you're above the self-support reserve, it's a percentage of your income. So ideally, the NCP gets an order that's appropriate, is able to pay on time and in full, leading to better outcomes for the children. Next slide. I mentioned protections for low-income NCPs. For NCPs that are earning at or below the federal poverty level, which, as you can see in the lower right, it was indexed in early this year to $13,590. That's for a family of one. And the self-support reserve is 135% of that, which works out to $18,347. At or below the FPL, you get what's known as a poverty order, which is $25 a month or less. It can be a $0 order, and there's a $500 cap on arrears. If you're earning above the FPL, but below the self-support reserve, a minimum order of $50 a month. If you're earning above the self-support reserve, then the New York State Child Support Standards Act kicks in, and it mandates that that at a minimum, the child support will be 17% of the NCP's adjusted gross income for one child, 25% for two children, 29% for three children, and it goes up to at least 35% if there are 5 children or more. Next slide. Where does this money come from? And I'm going to let you know that New York City OCSS, the city alone, collects over $750 million a year. That's $750 million just in New York City. And roughly 3/4 of that comes from income withholding. That is to say, money that is taken directly out of the NCP's paycheck. The other quarter comes from unemployment, seizing tax refunds, payments made by NCPs that don't have a steady paycheck. They may be members of the gig economy, something like that. But the most secure and stable flow of child support comes from non-custodial parents with jobs who have income withheld from those jobs. And that is true, by the way, pretty much across the United States. It's about the same everywhere. What gets withheld from income? Next slide. The obligation amount plus potentially an add amount. Now remember, I mentioned retroactivity. So in this example, let's say the obligation amount is $100 a month, but it took 6 months from the time the petition was filed in family court till there was an order. That would lead the judge to say, well, you didn't make any payments during those 6 months. Your obligation is $100 a month. So you have a retroactive obligation of $600, or it could be arrears later on in the case. That will result in an add amount to reduce arrears. That add amount is capped at 50% of the current obligation. So in our example, $600 owed for retro, the income withholding will be the $100 obligation plus $50, totaling $150 for the first 12 months. And the reason it's the first 12 months is because 12 times 50 equals 600. So after 12 months, if the payments are made regularly, that would do away with the arrears, and then the obligation amount, then the IWO would drop back to $100 a month. I think we're done with the math for today. Next slide. I mentioned enforcement. There are two kinds, administrative and judicial. The administrative enforcement actions start automatically based on the child support database when the NCP falls behind in meeting their regular payments. Different actions have different triggers. It's a little confusing. We're going to take a deeper dive into that in the third session that's focused on the needs of NCPs. I want to stress that NCPs are notified by mail and have the right to challenge. Maybe we got the wrong person. There's some poor guy in Oregon who's had multiple enforcement actions started against him. It's a case of mistaken identity. He keeps writing and said, I've never been in New York. I don't have any children. Why do you keep doing this to me? Every now and then that kind of thing happens, but it's very rare. The CP doesn't have to take any action when the NCP misses payments for administrative enforcement actions to kick in. Judicial enforcements, that involves the court, and they usually only start if administrative actions are unsuccessful. It results in a violation petition being filed. The court can reduce the obligation amount to a money judgment. The court can do all kinds of things, including incarceration, mandatory referral to a job training program, a variety of enforcement actions. Next slide. I mentioned earlier that child support ends in New York State when a child turns 21. There are a lot of states where the age of emancipation is 17 or 18. In New York State, it's 21, or when one of the parties petitions the court to terminate the order because the parents reconcile. We had somebody who was in that circumstance in the session we did this morning. Or when the child moves in with the non-custodial parent, joins the military, gets married, becomes fully independent because they become a TikTok influencer at the age of 16, or unfortunately, if the child passes away. But otherwise, that's the age of emancipation. However, I should note that under special circumstances, if the child goes to college, child support could continue up to the age of 23 if the custodial parent applies for that prior to the child turning 21. And in certain cases, if the child is disabled, child support can continue past the age of 21. Next slide. Now, we are here to help, and we have a lot of ways we can help. We can answer general questions about child support, and we know it's confusing. We can deal with specific questions. We can help you apply for child support. We can explain payments and obligations. We can help you modify an order. Maybe the NCP needs the order modified downward. Child support is supposed to be relevant to the person you are today. So we had lots of non-custodial parents who lost their jobs during the pandemic. They should have applied for a downward modification. If the custodial parent hears that the non-custodial parent got a promotion, doing better at work, changed jobs, hit the lottery, they could apply for an upward modification. We can also help you change your address. We need a current address. We can explain enforcement measures, explain what can be done to administratively to provide relief for certain enforcement actions. We can help NCPs with debt reduction. We got a lot of programs. We'll talk more about that in session 3. We can talk about employment programs, and we can also do the acknowledgement of parentage. And one other thing I want to mention real quick is that I mentioned earlier, cash assistance cases start in the borough offices, and non-cash cases start in family court support services. And a lot of the boroughs, those are in different places. Under the last mayoral administration, OCSS embarked on what I think is a really admirable program called No Wrong Door. So if you're not on cash assistance and you should have gone to family court, but instead you go to the borough office by mistake, instead of saying, oh, you're in the wrong place. And let me tell you, in the Bronx, family court and the borough office are on opposite sides of the borough. OCSS staff have now been trained. If somebody shows up at your office looking for help, you do everything you can to help them based on your knowledge of what their needs are before, and then help them know what they need to do and where they need to go to get their other answers. And I should also point out that we've learned a lot during the pandemic and are providing more services virtually so that you don't necessarily have to come to an office. Next slide. Valuable resources. And remember, we're going to send you a copy of this presentation, and all these blue links that you're looking at will be clickable. The NYC HRA OCSS, try saying that 3 times fast, website has an employment opportunities page, links to videos, even a page devoted to resources for children. Videos, there's an OCSS playlist on YouTube. How to request there's a very informative video, how to request a phone appointment with OCSS. Managing your child support explains about debt. There's a separate handbook for either NCPs or NCPs, about 40 pages, full of information. Our contact via email, the New York State Child Support Helpline, and a link to the mobile app that I mentioned earlier. I want to thank you all for listening